get this up here. All right, so this is Bible Geography 2. This is our lesson 7. And tonight we're going to actually just start in a verse that I read this morning that I thought was interesting. And it related to something that we have studied about. It's in Amos chapter 6, verse 14. So I read that verse this morning, actually in my devotions, and it caught my attention. And here the prophet Amos says, "But behold, I will raise up against you a nation, O house of Israel, saith the Lord, the God of hosts, and they shall afflict you from the entering in of Hamath." And then he says, "unto the river of the wilderness." So do you remember Hamath? So what are those geographical designations, and what do they mean? So that's what my question is. Do you remember Hamath? Who preached regarding Hamath? You remember? Jonah. So do you remember what Jonah said in 2 Kings? So just keep your finger there. Look at 2 Kings and chapter 14, verse 25. And do you remember what Jonah preached? That during, and it was during this period of time of Jeroboam, during Jeroboam's reign, Jeroboam II, that this related to it. And he says in 2 Kings 14:25 that he restored the coast of Israel from the entering in of Hamath unto the sea of the plain. So from Hamath to the sea of the plain, and here it's from the entering of Hamath to the river of the wilderness. So look at your map 67, and where was Hamath? Actually, Hamath it's above this. This has, do you remember Hamath?
No. North, right?
That's like way north. I'm trying, I got map 67 for, well, on 65, you see, on map 65, that black arrow at the top, it says to Hamath up there. So it was way north. So there were trade routes related to that. And so Jonah said that their border would be restored way up to the north, Hamath. So going to this, but here it's a prophet of Amos is prophesying judgment. They shall afflict you from the entering in of Hamath. That's what God prophesied that he would give them. And now he says, you're going to have oppression from Hamath unto the river of the wilderness. Now, you know what the word wilderness is in the Hebrew? It's Arabah. I don't know if we've talked about the Arabah yet, but if you actually look at map 67 and almost any map, look right under the Dead Sea. What does it say right under the Dead Sea? The Arabah. And so it says to the river of the wilderness, the river of the Arabah. But interestingly as well, in the margin of my Bible, they have a little note by the word river. It could also be valley. There's the King James translators, valley, river. I'm like, why is it a river or a valley? Well, because the Arabah is actually the Jordan Rift. Remember the Jordan Rift? So it's a valley, but what runs in that valley? The river. So there is a valley, there's a river in the valley. So that's why the translators did put river of the wilderness, because there is a river in there. And so the Arabah is really the Jordan, and it could be before the Dead Sea, but definitely underneath the Dead Sea. You see many maps, and you'll see the Arabah. And guess what river it goes right on down to? That Jordan Rift. It goes down to, where's the trade route go down to? And where did also some of the kings wanted to control? They wanted to control what? If you go down all the way to Arabah, that Rift Valley to Ezion Geber, right? So he says from the entering in of Hamath, that's way north, and then all the way to the river of the wilderness, which is the Dead Sea area. So I believe that's what he's saying in that verse. So anyway, that's where Bible geography kind of.
Pastor, what's the difference again between Zion, Geber, and
Elath? They're just right next to each other.
Yeah. But does
They're right
Elath has like trade routes too?
They're both.
Both have.
It
Okay.
seems that they're so close to each other that there's. I'm sure there will be a connection between them.
Okay.
Okay. So anyway, that was free. That was just what I saw today, and it related to what we've been studying in here. So, but where we are tonight is on page number 16. And we're at point number 3. Is that correct? We're at Jerusalem. So we talked last week about the Assyrian siege upon Jerusalem that was defeated by God when he sent an angel and smote 185,000 of the Assyrian troops. And that's what you call what Rabshakeh and what the Assyrian, who was the Assyrian general, led by Sennacherib, that's what you call psychological warfare. They tried to intimidate. They tried to really get into the heads of the people there, but God defeated them. Okay, so now we're going to move to Jerusalem from Hezekiah to the destruction. That's what we're going to cover tonight. Hopefully, we're going to hit to the end of this chapter. So we're in our book here, and we're on about, let's see here, Syrian Warfare. Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so actually on page 145, and we already hit a little bit at this, but here's 2 pages, especially dealing about Jerusalem from Hezekiah to the destruction in 586. And what are the significant parts of this little article? It's kind of like an addendum into the chapter. But letter A is the water systems were improved, the city was expanded, and we did talk about that last week. And if you look on page number 146 as well, and I showed you some pictures of the Hezekiah's tunnels, as the city, the water system from what river there, or what spring? From the Gihon spring, and he brought the water into the city so that they would have water if the city was being besieged from the outside. So the water systems were improved as the city expanded, and Jerusalem was also expanded as you look at that map. And we looked at that actually last week on page 145, where he did a western expansion of Jerusalem, and you can see where Hezekiah expanded the city quite a lot there. As you see, Hezekiah's the city a lot larger.
So you said, Pastor, the water system were improved, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. So on the top of page 17, we see Assyrian warfare now. He has another article, and these are kind of like addendums to the flow of the chapter. So here is Assyrian warfare. This is very interesting. Now, are you guys staying up with the reading, by the way? Are you reading the book? Are you reading the book? You're supposed to be actually in your notes. I'm going to actually give you good news. You want good news? I'm going to give you good news tonight. But you have to read the pages that we put here. That's not the good news yet. But today is October 28th. So you should actually have read up to 173. So you should have already read this. I don't know if you did. I'm not going to ask you to raise your hands. But you should be trying to read these things. But the good news is you only have to read up to page 188. Because past 188 is into the New Testament geography, and we're not going to get there. So maybe that will encourage you to do the reading. So next week is November 4th. That would be the end of the reading if you were up with your reading. So that's good. That's the good news. Okay, but Assyrian warfare. What does the first line say about Assyrian warfare? What was the reputation of Assyria? Have you heard of the reputation, the violence of this empire? They were known for, what does it say at the very top line? Unbridled, unrestrained cruelty. So that's the blank. And what? Efficiency. They had that was their reputation. And they did very many heinous acts that are almost like modern day terrorism. I mean, drape the dead bodies of people over the city walls and cut off heads and display all these things. But they probably weren't the only kingdom that did that as well. Some of this is very interesting, though, and gives us a real sense of ancient warfare. So I do want us to read, since I'm not sure you guys all read this, but at the bottom of page 148, the last paragraph, you see where it says that Assyrian chariot corps was among the most feared elements in the army. So notice what he says here. He says, reliefs depict chariots pulled by 2 or 4 horses, manned by 2, 3, or even 4 crewmen. The 2-man crew consisted of a driver and an archer. Later, 1 and then 2 shield barriers were added. The driver also wielded a spear in battle. All crewmen possessed swords. In addition to these battle troops, the army carried transport wagons, supply personnel, engineers who cut roads, built bridges, constructed ramps, and built siege machines. So that's similar to modern day warfare. That, in other words, they have different divisions and special, different MOSs, they call them, different jobs. Some people build bridges. My father, actually, when he was stationed in the army down in Texas, his army base was being trained to build air bases in different parts of the battle. So anyway, then it says, okay, so they had siege machines. Now that was very important. They would siege cities with walls with siege machines. Intelligence operatives, so they had intelligence, spies and interpreters. I mean, it's just really interesting when you think about how they got this guy yesterday, al-Baghdadi, and they knew about his compound. They knew about, there were underground tunnels. How did they know? How did they get that information of where were the tunnels and what kind of tunnel complexes were in that? Well, it was because of intelligence. They had somebody on the ground, maybe, who got on the inside, and that they thought maybe that they were friendlies or whatever, but maybe they were working as spies. So anyway, they had intelligence operatives, spies, interpreters, scribes who recorded the campaign, provided lists of the booty taken, cultic personnel who offered sacrifices, divine omens. Normally, the army campaigned in the summer months, avoiding the agricultural season, bad winter weather. In friendly territory, local vassals supplied provisions, but in hostile regions, the army lived off the land. So that was I thought very interesting. On the other page too, he talks about the siege strategy. So I'm going to ask Micah if you could read on the other side of the page, the paragraph, the third paragraph down that begins, the Assyrian reliefs contain many scenes.
Yeah. Assyrian reliefs contain many scenes displaying their siege strategies. The Lachish frieze is especially pertinent since it depicts Sennacherib's siege of Lachish in his campaign aimed at Jerusalem in 701 BC. Typically, the Syrians encamped near their target and established a perimeter around the city, ensuring no escape for the defenders. Assyrian siege machinery, including battering rams with mobile siege towers, were maneuvered into position along ramparts of earth and stone constructed by engineers. The battering rams were used to attack gates and weak points in the walls. Crews inside operated the ram, while from above, archers gave protecting fire. Rams even carried firemen whose mission was to thwart any attempt by defenders to set the siege machines on fire. Assault troops used scaling ladders to reach the upper walls of the city, while sappers tunneled beneath the fortifications or attempted to breach walls at weak points.
Okay, so the siege machine would be to break down the wall Also, to get as close to the wall as possible, maybe get over the wall, they would be trying to dig under the wall. And meanwhile, those inside the walls would be trying to throw some form of fiery projectiles to put those siege machines on fire and defeat them. And so it was all happening like that. So, and then here's if you look carefully at this relief, you see the siege machine in this. This is a detail of the siege of Lachish recorded on the walls in the palace of Sennacherib. And you can kind of see that it almost looks like a towery kind of thing, it seems like maybe that's the siege machine, and then you see some soldiers around and so forth. So a little bit of ancient warfare though. Okay, so Assyria was known for its cruelty and efficiency, and their armies numbered in the hundreds of thousands. Okay, how's it going tonight? Good to see you. Okay, number 5, Manasseh's long rule, and we're on page 150. Manasseh returned to the pagan ways of Ahaz. After Hezekiah, Manasseh ruled. And he ruled for a long time, but he returned to pagan ways. And scripture says the Assyrian king carried him to Babylon in chains. If you could look in 2 Chronicles chapter 33 and verse 10. 2 Chronicles, we'll go there. Chapter 33 and verse 10. Through 13. And here it says in verse 11, and Bailey, can you please read verse 11 and 12, please, of 2 Chronicles 33.
Wherefore the Lord brought upon them the captains of the host of the king of Assyria, which took Manasseh among the thorns, and bound him with fetters, and carried him to Babylon. And when he was in affliction, he besought the Lord his God, and humbled himself greatly before the God of his fathers.
Okay, and so on your map here, number 75, map 75, find Babylon on the map, and you see the white box related to that, and it's down here. That, maybe I should look at this one here tonight. Manasseh brought in chains before the Assyrian king. So he is brought to Babylon by Assyria. So guess who? Again, Assyria is the empire, so Assyria has control of the city of Babylon at this point. So that's the main thing you have to know about Assyria, or about Manasseh, that he was brought in chains to Babylon. And while there, he did repent. So that's what you have to know about Manasseh. Okay? Number 6, Assyrian supremacy under Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal, also map 75. What is interesting here is under Ashurbanipal, and you might want to just, this isn't in your notes now, so draw an arrow after Ashurbanipal, who ruled from 669 to 627, Nahum chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. Nahum chapter 3, verses 8 through 10. And find this on your map. Find Egypt, this little box down here, and we see that Ashurbanipal does attack down in Egypt, and it's mentioned in the book of Nahum. So if you go there, please, Nahum. And the book of Nahum is a sequel to the book of Jonah. Jonah is the repentance of Nineveh. Nahum is the destruction of Nineveh. And so here in chapter 3, he says in verse 8, and Joni, could you read, please, verse 8 and 9?
What is it again, Patrick?
Nahum chapter 3, verses 8 and 9.
Nahum 3, 8, and 9. Art thou better than Populus? No, that was situate among the rivers, that had the waters round about it, whose rampart was the sea, and her wall was from the sea. Ethiopia and Egypt were her strength, and it was infinite. Put and Lubim were thy helpers.
Okay, those are other African nations. Lubim could be, well, Libya. But here, populous, no. Now, have you ever read the book of Nahum and wondered, or did you ever look up no? Did you ever find out where that was? No. So I'm hoping you say no in a way. No, I don't know where no is. But that's why we're doing this class, so we can at least try to put some light on it. So where is no? Why does it say? What is he talking about? Art thou better than populous? No. What's the answer to that question? No. Although we would want to say yes to that no question, but the point is that they brought, God is saying to Nineveh at this point, in a way, God used Assyria to bring judgment to no, but are you better than them? No, I'm going to bring judgment to you now. So that's what's really behind this question. But here we see where no is, and what's the name of the city in your map?
No Ammon.
Exactly, no Ammon. Or Thebes. And so that's where that is. And he's saying Ethiopia and Egypt were her strength. So she thought, this city thought it could find protection by its location in Ethiopia and with Egypt, that Ethiopia and Egypt would keep her protected from Assyria that was so far away. Could Assyria be a threat to no, Ammon, which was so far away and would be protected because of its location? No. Okay, so there we go. So know that Nahum chapter 3 talks about the defeat of No by Ashurbanipal, but at the end of this chapter is Assyria's fall. Now, so point number 7, Assyria's fall in 612 BC. So that's a date that you would have to know. Yes. I'm sorry. So again, putting this together, the height of the Assyrian kingdom was when they were sieging Jerusalem. They had defeated Samaria in when? 722. Then they sought to defeat Jerusalem 701 with Hezekiah. They were defeated. But now it's 612 and they're no more. So what really happens is letter A, and this is in your book as well, under Assyria's fall. And I'm getting a lot of these statements straight out of the book. You see letter A? Look under Assyria's fall. It says,
Beginning of the end.
It's the beginning of the end. You see it? There it is. So the death of Ashurbanipal in 627 marks the beginning of the end of the Assyrian dynasty. And again, this is right at the time of King Josiah coming into power, and right at the time when Jeremiah would be entering the prophetic ministry. And who writes of Nineveh's fall, letter B? So you have to know that for sure. The prophet Nahum wrote of Nineveh's fall, which took place 612 BC. So if you look at map 76, because what's coinciding with the fall of Assyria is the rise of Babylon. And the last verse of the book of Nahum is a verse that has always been a challenge to me, just as far as, again, the influence of the cities over the world. Nahum chapter 3, verse 19. Who has that verse? Frida, do you have Nahum? Are you? Oh,
What I do have.
oh, 3:19. Nahum 3:19.
There is no healing of thy bruise, thy wound is grievous. All that hear the bruit of thee shall clap the hands over thee. For upon whom hath not thy wickedness passed continually?
Okay. So what does that verse say? What is God saying to Nineveh through Nahum in that verse? What is he saying?
Not coming back.
Okay. What had they done in the days of Jonah? They had repented. But now there's judgment. That's one thing. What will be the response of the nations and the people around them over their judgment? There will be, yeah. They will clap their hands over the yes. There will be a happiness. All that here, the brute, the destruction of you will clap their hands. And then what does he say about the city of Nineveh? What had it done? Why did God bring its why did God bring his judgment upon them? Sid? Did I hear you back there? No. Oh, Jeannie. That was Jeannie. I'm sorry. It was kind of in the same line there. Okay. It was a mumble, so it was hard to hear. Jeannie?
Wickedness.
It had done what? Past continually. For upon whom had not thy wickedness passed? And I believe there's an application to cities in that verse, that the wickedness of cities doesn't stay in the city. It influences, but obviously the wickedness here was one of military violence and destruction. They would pass over other cultures and bring terrible devastation and cruelty and death. And so they passed continually over that ancient world in establishing their empire. But God was bringing judgment to them. So this map does show who is fighting against Assyria now in its final days. Okay, Babylon for one. Who else? Who? The Medes. The Medes. Okay? Which are, we could say the Medes, the Medes. Okay, so that's what goes in our blank there. Letter C. Rival powers, Assyrians' final days. Babylon rises in strength. The Persians or Medes also, the Medes also, and they attacked, a dual attack. And it fell in 612 BC. And
Assyria fell in.
Assyria fell in 612 BC. Right. That was the blank number 7. I think we also had it earlier as well. And Nineveh fell. Letter D is Nineveh fell. Nineveh falls in 612 BC. And again, that's verified in history as well as the Bible. Okay, so far here we're saying Manasseh, he was carried to where? Babylon. But there he repented while he was in chains. Sometimes you have to be carried away and put in the chains before you wake up. So he repented. A Syrian king attacked down into Egypt. What Assyrian king attacked into Egypt? If I were to ask you that question. Ashurbanipal. And where's that in the Bible? Nahum 3, 8 through 10. When did Assyria fall? 612 BC. What prophetic book foretells the destruction of Nineveh? Nahum. All right, so these are all good possible test questions. You see, this is review, so you don't have to ask me what's on the test. There it is. All right.
Pastor, would you say
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Is he a Syrian?
No Iman. No Iman. Ashurbanipal was Assyrian. That's if you look under point 6, Assyrian supremacy under Esarhaddon and Ashurbanipal. And so that passage in Nahum chapter 3 does refer to the historical attack that he had against Egypt of no Ammon. All right, now, Egyptian ambition, page 152. Egypt still had control of the international coastal highway. Now, this is what is interesting as well here. So look at our map, and it says here, Egypt is having control over the international coastal highway. So because they're way south, they still want to have some control up north to control trade routes between the Fertile Crescent area and all the way down into Egypt. So find Carchemish in your map. It's where it's at the north, at the top of that orange arrow. Do you see Carchemish? Let's see here. Map 76. Okay, so it's right up, way up here, Carchemish. So what's going to happen here, and why is this important? The Battle of Carchemish is a very important battle in history, and it's referred to in the Bible. Why is this battle important? Page 18. This was the final show. It occurred in 605 BC. Now remember, Assyria has been defeated in 612. So now Egypt is still fighting for world supremacy with Babylon. They had a garrison, a military post up here in Carchemish in order to control the trade routes. So Babylon is going to go and seek to defeat them. And who's going to come along and try to help Egypt in this battle? Who do you think? If you look there in the map, who's Assyria? What color is Assyria in the map on page map 76?
Purple.
They're purple. Do you see them?
Yeah.
They're also, so the remnant of the Assyrian Empire is still, they're going to try to help Egypt to defeat Babylon, because remember, Assyria and Babylon, they're close. So this was a major battle in its day. And who was the Babylonian war general? Nebuchadnezzar. He was not the king yet of Babylon. His father was still the king. Nebuchadnezzar is going to lead Babylon to the Battle of Carchemish, is going to put a death blow to Assyria as well as to Egypt. And then almost simultaneous, Nebuchadnezzar's father dies, and he goes back to Babylon, and he is crowned the king in 605 BC. So that's important. So letter C is that same year Nebuchadnezzar took the throne of Babylon, and it marks the beginning of a new empire, Babylon. And so the Battle of Carchemish is referred to in Jeremiah chapter 46, verse 2. You might want to put those verses somewhere. Okay, so here we are, where if you look at this, do you see in your map, Egyptian forces led by Necho are defeated by Nebuchadnezzar, son of Nabopolassar, who was still the emperor or the king of Babylon at that time. Right up here, see that? So look in Jeremiah chapter 46.
Pastor, what was B?
The Battle of Carchemish. And you can see how to spell Carchemish. It's there in your map, and it's on page 153 also. It was, do you see where in the column on the right-hand side of page 153, the Battle of Carchemish was won by Nebuchadnezzar. In that same year, he took the throne upon the death of his father. And so this marked the beginning of the Neo-Babylon Empire. Okay, so Jeremiah chapter 46 and verse 2, and I'll read these. It says, the word of the Lord which came to Jeremiah the prophet against the Gentiles, against Egypt, against the army of Pharaoh Necho, king of Egypt, which was by the river Euphrates in Carchemish. Now notice the history, the geography, the accuracy of the Bible, that it has the king of Egypt right, it has the rivers right, it has the name of the battle right. It says, which was by the rivers of Euphrates in Carchemish, which Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, smote in the 4th year of Jehoiakim, son of Josiah, king of Judah. And then, it just goes on into military type expressions here. But it says in verse 5, wherefore have I seen them dismayed, turned away back, their mighty ones are beaten down or fled apace, and look not back, for fear was round about, saith the Lord. Okay, so the Battle of Carchemish is mentioned there. It's mentioned in another place, and we'll look at that in just a moment. So, but that's what's significant there, that the Battle of Carchemish was really the mark of the new Babylonian Empire. Okay, so then we move on. The Kingdom of Josiah. Now, I put a question mark. If you again look at page 153 under the Kingdom of Josiah, it says the rapid decline of the Syrian power created an opening for an opportunist like Josiah to steer Judah along a new course. I don't know. That didn't strike me the right way to call Josiah like an opportunist. I put a question mark by that. I just letting you know that. But here is what happens, though. I mean, Josiah was a great king. So let's look at a few things about Josiah. First of all, and if you go to 2 Chronicles Chapter 34, please go to 2 Chronicles Chapter 34. Okay, and he was 8 years old when he began to reign. He reigned 31 years. And letter A is they found the book of the law. The book of the law was found, and I'm just outlining your book here. That's right on your book, page 154. His accomplishments, if you look down, it says, at the very bottom line of page 154 in the left-hand column, says what? Josiah was claiming the northern territories of old Israel. So what goes in your blank? Josiah's accomplishments. He reclaimed what? Northern territories of old Israel. You like how original I am in the notes? But I'm just trying to really teach the book and bring out what I believe is important in the book, but what's in the Bible. And that's what I get excited about, what's in the Bible. So is this in the Bible? So again, now we're on map. We're back to map number 77. Map 77. And if you look, okay, so look at the blank kind of like in the middle of Samaria here. What does it say? Yeah. So when you read your book, do you read the maps? Do you look at the little boxes? The boxes are great, man. I love the little white boxes. Okay. So that's a good box, man. What does it say under there? Josiah dismantled the high place at Bethel. Who established that high place? Jeroboam. And there's actually a whole chapter after Jeroboam. We didn't talk about it, but there's a whole chapter, 1 Kings chapter 13. God sent a prophet to Jeroboam at Bethel and preached against that. Remember the prophet? He went one way, and God said, the same way you go, I want you to go back. But then he met a apostate prophet along the way, and that prophet says, oh no, God told me to tell you to this. And he listened to the wrong guy. He doesn't listen to God. And what happened to that prophet on the way back? He was eaten by a lion. So that's the story. He was preaching against Jeroboam at this altar and said that he preached that there was going to be a king named Josiah. And then here's Josiah, and we'll look at the verse, he's going to tear down that altar, just as God had prophesied, the altar of Bethel. Okay, so look at 2 Chronicles chapter 34 to back up this point we're saying. He reclaimed northern territories of old Israel. 2 Chronicles chapter 34 and verse number 6. And Carrie, do you have verse 6 and 7, please?
Yes, and so did he in the cities of Manasseh and Ephraim and Simeon, even unto Naphtali, with their mattocks round about. And when he had broken down the altars and the groves, and had beaten the graven images into powder, and cut down all the idols throughout all the land of Israel, he returned to Jerusalem.
Okay, and also verse 9. Okay, who has verse 9 there? Ruth, do you have verse 9 of 2 Chronicles 34?
And when they came to Hilkiah the high priest, they delivered the money that was brought into the house of God, which the Levites that kept the doors had gathered of the hand of Manasseh and Ephraim, and of all the remnant of Israel, and of all Judah and Benjamin, and they returned to Jerusalem.
Okay, so remember now, in the kingdom of Josiah, Israel had been taken into captivity. So perhaps when you read these verses, and if you think about the geography of these tribes, what is Josiah's vision? What is he believing God could do? Restore the kingdom as one nation again. So he's going up into those northern tribes. And if you look, please, this is where you got to go back to your notes, go back to the northern tribes, page 90, map 41, page 90, map 41. So what are the tribes he mentions in verse 6? Manasseh and Ephraim. And remember, Ephraim is even often a designation for the northern kingdom, but here he does say Manasseh, and Manasseh is where? North and into Israel, and Ephraim was the key tribe of that northern kingdom of Israel. So he mentions Manasseh and Ephraim. They were the two sons of who, by the way? Of Joseph. And then he says, and Simeon, which was south, actually, of Judah. And he says, unto Naphtali. Where's Naphtali? That's the northernmost tribe. So unto Naphtali. And in his rebuilding effort, what is he doing as well? They're collecting money, bringing it to the house of God to rebuild the temple, restore it. And so these tribes as well are giving to that. So he's trying to bring them back into the nation. He's trying to help them feel Jewish as one nation as well, Israel. And so that's important, I believe. And if you look in 2 Kings, if you look in 2 Kings chapter 23, which is a parallel passage of Josiah, 2 Kings chapter 23, and I'm sure you've seen this a lot in your reading of the Bible. You just kind of know this already, but I'll just let you know anyway, even though I'm sure you know, because this is such familiar. These scriptures are so familiar to us, right? 2 Kings 23. I mean, wow. It's kind of interesting how we do know certain passages of the Bible a lot better than others. But so here's Josiah, and he is bringing great reforms to the land. And he is tearing down the houses in verse 7 of the Sodomites that were by the house of the Lord. The evil of the world always wants to camp right beside in order to get into the true worship of God. He tore down the houses of the Sodomites that were right by, and the women and whatever things that they were involved with. But look at verse 8. It says, and he brought all the priests out of the cities of Judah and defiled the high places where the priests had burned incense. From where? From Geba to Beersheba. Okay, so again, I know you've probably run across this a lot in your devotions, but where is Geba from Geba to Beersheba. Now, so again, you know what? There's a point I think that's interesting. Look in your map 77 under the reign of Josiah. Find Geba. It's not, don't look high. It's just a little bit above Jerusalem. Do you see it? From Geba to Beersheba. And so, and we see in the map here, this is why this box is so amazing. It's in the Bible. What verse? 2 Kings. Joni, I know you're so excited to see this. 2 Kings chapter what? 23 and verse 8. There it is. From Geba to Beersheba. Why just there? Why do you think just there? Because the idolatry was so rampant. I believe that's the best Josiah could do at that point. Okay, and this chapter also gives very in-depth information about the idolatry of Israel and so forth. But in verse 15 of this same chapter, in 2 Kings 23, verse 15, here's where he talks about the altar that was at Bethel. In verse 15, moreover, the altar that was at Bethel in the high place, which Jeroboam son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin, have made, both that altar and the high place, he brake down, burned the high place, stamped it small, and Josiah turned himself, and it says at the end of verse 16, according to the word of the Lord, which the man of God proclaimed, and proclaimed those words. He's still called the man of God. But that was at Bethel also, which is right above Geba. So some important things there. So Josiah's death. Okay, so you might want to put in your notes somewhere. Put in your notes, because we just looked up from what? From what? Geba to Beersheba. We looked that up. 2 Kings 23, verse 8. That's not in your notes. You know why? Because when I made the notes, I didn't find that. So certain things I don't find until afterwards, but I thought that was good. So let's look at the death of Josiah. So the Egyptian king, and if you go back to 2 Chronicles, we'll try to do this and we'll have to finish up here. But in 2 Chronicles, back in chapter number 35, 2 Chronicles 35, verse 20 is the verse. That verse is not in your notes either. So you might want to put beside letter C, where it says Egyptian king Necho, Necho, and that's in 2 Chronicles 35, verse 20. Please put that verse by letter C. Egyptian king Necho killed Josiah in 609 BC. Josiah's motives are unclear. And again, I'm taking this from your book on page 154. But perhaps, what does he say under Josiah's death? Why do you think Josiah would have gone out? So basically what's happening is King Necho is on his way from Egypt to the Battle of Carchemish. It's before the Battle of Carchemish. And he's on his way there because this is 609 BC. And when is the Battle of Carchemish? What did we say?
605.
605. Okay, so but he's on his way there. And Josiah comes to the king to war. And the king says, no, I don't want to fight you. I don't want to fight you. But Josiah gets involved in this battle that he probably shouldn't have. And he ends up getting killed. Because it says here, now here's where we see Carchemish also, 2 Chronicles 35, verse 20. After all this, when Josiah prepared the temple, Necho, king of Egypt, came up to fight against Carchemish by Euphrates. And Josiah went out against him. And as I mentioned, the king says, what do I have to do? What am I doing? But it says in verse 22, where did they fight this battle? Where was this battle fought? At the end of verse 22. In the valley of Megiddo. Exactly. And we find another war. How many wars were fought in the Valley of Megiddo? Many battles were fought there. So that's what our little book says in that white box, 609, Josiah's killed. Okay, so why do you think Josiah may have gone against the king of Egypt at this moment? Number one, he sensed ultimate victory by Babylon. Maybe Josiah knew he had to pick sides between Babylon and Egypt. Assyria has been defeated in 612. It's 609. Babylon is rising in power. And so he believes maybe it will benefit him in a Babylonian relationship to fight against Egypt. Maybe that's one reason, is what he's saying there. But number two, what would be another reason? He feared further, what? Egyptian interference in his kingdom. So that's that. He feared further Egyptian interference in his kingdom. Well. Okay. I really thought we were going to finish this chapter tonight, but alas, we'll have to stop right there and let that sink in and keep reading your book. Keep reading all those little articles as addendums. Keep reading the white boxes and keep finding where these are in the Bible, the Word of God. All right. And we'll stop right there.
Have a quiz next week.